Hey, welcome back to the House of Trauma podcast. It's your favorite podcast host, Kiana Bree, and now let's get into it. Y'all really need to start respecting people's boundaries. I'm going to say that again. Y'all really need to start respecting people's boundaries. I personally am 110% convinced that if you don't respect boundaries that somebody sets in place, you don't respect that person. Because a boundary, quite simply put, is a limit to something. By definition, it's a line that marks the limits of an area, or a limit of a subject or activity. Boundaries show where one thing ends and another thing begins. Y'all catching what I'm putting out? Boundaries in relationships help each person figure out where one person ends and another person begins. It creates a mutual respect between individuals. If I tell you that this is a boundary for me, this is a limitation, this is a line that I don't want you to cross, this is something that makes me uncomfortable, this is where I draw the line in the sand, right? And you decide to hop your happy ass over that line, that is a lack of respect for me. And you cannot convince me otherwise. Like, I'm sorry. And every relationship has different boundaries. You know, we have a lot of different relationships, personal and professional. So the boundaries I have with my family can look different from the boundaries that I set with my friends, that I set between me and my significant other, that I set between me and my coworkers. The boundaries look different that I set between me and total strangers, right? And I've spoken on this before. I can't remember what, I think it was in Triggers, the Triggered episode, where I spoke on where I draw a line, where I draw a boundary as in form of my professional life. While being a flight attendant is when passengers feel the need to make physical contact. Don't tap, don't touch, don't pet, don't push, don't shove. Like, don't make any type of physical contact with me, because I'm going to assume that you, A, don't respect my boundaries, and B, you want to fight, because this is where I draw the line. And, you know, sometimes it's hard to see where people draw boundaries if you don't vocalize them. And I have not always vocalized where I draw my boundaries. So in relation to my job and where I have to draw boundaries between passengers, I let a passenger know on more than one occasion my ears work. My ears work. So there was no need for you to touch me before you spoke. It wasn't like you were constantly speaking and trying to get my attention and I couldn't hear you. I was ignoring you. You know, your words went unheard. You never spoke any words. You just immediately opted to put your hands on me. And I know, okay, saying like put your hands on me can mean something far more aggressive than what it was. But for me personally, any type of physical contact, even a tap on the shoulders, is aggressive. And it's like, well, what's the beef between me and you? I just had a passenger the other day. I was doing main cabin service. So, you know, I'm serving the main cabin. I'm getting drinks, snacks. And there was a gentleman sitting next to his daughter. And he said that they would take the pretzels, but they didn't want anything to drink. Okay, cool. So that's aircraft left. I go over to aircraft right, and I'm literally talking to, there's two other ladies over there, and they're telling me what they want to drink. All of a sudden, someone's aggressively tapping my forearm. And so I turn around because number one is disrespectful for you to be trying to get my attention when I'm actively speaking to someone else. Wait, you had your turn. So now you can wait until someone else's turn is up. Secondly, it's disrespectful to be tapping me when I'm literally not even a foot away from, like, I'm literally standing right next to your seat. And I repeat, my ears work. And then he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. She changed her mind. She wants a Sprite. And that's totally fine. You're allowed to change your mind. But what you're not allowed to do is aggressively tap my forearm when my ears work. So again, that's a boundary. And if I notify you of that boundary that you did not know existed prior to, and you still decide to step over that line, so had he tapped me again, we would have had a problem, like a big problem. And again, every relationship looks different because every relationship is unique and can require unique boundaries. And, whatever the relationship is, we need to respect the existing boundaries while also giving each other space to set new boundaries. Now, I have witnessed that, when you don't set clear boundaries in the beginning of any relationship and then you attempt to double back and reset those boundaries into place, people often have a hard time respecting your new boundaries for a number of reasons. You're trying to draw a line in the sand now, but this is something that I've always done. And so it could be that they don't respect you enough to respect your new boundaries, or they have a hard time breaking, that bad habit, a hard time looking in the mirror and being like, wow, I really do cross the line sometimes, or damn, I am overstepping, my boundaries with this person. People really have a hard time, old habits die hard, right? Old habits die hard. And there has been many relationships where I've not set clear boundaries in the beginning. And it could be sometimes I don't even know that this is a boundary that I need to set. To me, some things are common sense. And I just feel I wouldn't do that to somebody. But it is wrong for me to think that somebody else wouldn't do it as well, because you can't expect you from other people. So there are lines that I wouldn't cross. There are boundaries that I wouldn't push to their limits, but I can't automatically expect everyone to have that same, be in that same space mentally, right? In order to see something as being inappropriate or crossing a boundary. So again, when you don't set those clear boundaries in the beginning of any relationship, it's going to be really hard to double back, because outside of them, not respecting you or having a hard time breaking that habit, maybe they just genuinely don't want to. So for example, and I've had a few friendships where I feel I didn't set clear boundaries in the beginning, and I might let somebody slide because it's just okay, you did something one time, or maybe you just didn't mean any harm. And then later on, I'm okay, this is where we stand, and don't ever pull that shit again. And then they pull that shit again, and then we're good as done. We're as good as motherfucking done. But it's so important to be vocal about it. And I think I spoke about this in the Queen of Detachment episode. And I strongly encourage you to go back and listen to that episode in its entirety for context, because I've dropped people in different types of relationships in the past, motherfucking hot potatoes, just off the strength of them crossing a boundary that maybe I never even vocalized. Because again, part of me feels some boundaries are just common sense that you just wouldn't cross. I wouldn't do that, so I would think that somebody else wouldn't do that. And that's not necessarily true. So for example, a friend that I had for over a decade, we were roommates at a time. And I think because we had known each other for so long, I didn't feel that certain boundaries needed to be vocalized. And once I felt that my ex-roommate was crossing these boundaries, I literally had to sit him down one day and was hey, this is where I have to draw the line. You do too much in this aspect, or this is none of your business. I don't need you this deep into my personal life. I don't need you doing this. This is not appropriate. Please stop. And this person literally personality did a complete 1 motherfucking 80, because I think that he couldn't rationalize the fact that I was now, after so much time, drawing this line. And I think the biggest issue was as it pertains to my personal life and what it is that I do, as far as dating and who I want to talk to and how far I want to go with the relationship. Because I can go on a date with someone and he'll just be oh, you need to do this and you need to do that. And this person, this is how you're going to seal the deal. And I'm just no. It was just a date. It was quite literally just a date. And I'm probably never going to talk to this guy ever again, because that's just where I am with the relationship for whatever reason. Maybe be no, you need to do this and you need to do that. And I'm this is where we stop, because you're not my dating coach. You're not my life coach. You're not God. So I don't need you telling me how I need to maneuver as far as dating. And if I say I'm not talking to this person for whatever reason. I don't need you to try to convince me why I should or what I should do next or how I should turn the situation around. And we will bump heads in that aspect. But it's just like, why am I bumping heads with you about my personal relationships? Like, I don't need you that deep in there. Or another example would get really weird. Like if I didn't go into grave detail about a date or about a situation or why I decided to stop talking to somebody. So again, I had to draw a line in the sand because it's none of your business. It's none of your business. I choose to invite you into the areas of my life that I choose to invite you in, and I need you to accept those areas. Like I said, every relationship is different. So one thing I tell one friend, I might not tell another friend because relationships are different. They're unique. Dynamics are unique. And so if I choose to not go into detail with you about a certain situation and you're upset about it, that's number one, that's weird to me. Number two, I need you to respect the things that I'm willing to openly share with you and leave it at that, and not try to pry for more information or try to navigate behind the scenes like the fucking puppet master to try to make a situation that's nothing into something. And so long story short, that was the beginning of the end of our relationship when I begun to draw those boundaries, seeing boundaries, understanding boundaries, and establishing boundaries isn't always easy, but it's so important with any healthy relationship to have boundaries and to have healthy boundaries. And I cannot stress the importance of standing 10 toes down on your boundaries. And as a person who has not always set healthy boundaries in place or vocalized my boundaries, I encourage you to, when you set those boundaries, to stand 10 toes down on them. Like if you feel like this is a boundary for you, do not allow anyone for any reason at any point in time to cross that line. You draw that line in the sand. That's your border. That's your limitation. The minute somebody even leans over that line, it needs to be checked. It cannot go unchecked. And it doesn't have to be like this dramatic, super like confrontational, big ordeal, but it needs to go, like, it cannot go unacknowledged. Because I promise you, the minute you start to let your boundaries be tossed around and played with, it's not something that's easy to come back from. It's already not easy to set healthy boundaries. Imagine like putting a boundary in place and being like, okay, this is how I feel about something. And if you're making it a boundary, then you obviously feel strongly about it. And the person who's usually setting the boundary is the most uncomfortable person in the situation. Like whatever the situation is something that for whatever reason, it makes you uncomfortable. It makes you uneasy. You don't like it. So you set that limitation and you stand 10 toes down on it. And it doesn't matter who it is. If it's your friend, if it's your family, if it's your significant other, if it's your boss, you set those boundaries and you set those limitations and you stand 10 toes down on them, and you don't allow anyone to push you or bully you or force you to feel like, I'll just let it go this time. Or maybe it was too deep of a boundary. Like maybe I was too strict. Like maybe I can just let it slide this one time, or I'll let this one person slide. No. Take it from me. Do not let people cross your boundaries, no matter how upset they get about it, no matter how uncomfortable they pretend it makes them feel. Because if they're uncomfortable, how do they expect that you feel about it? Because I wouldn't draw that line in the sand like the example I just gave you. Like I'm uncomfortable with you inserting yourself into my love life when you're not, like, you carry no significance in this. Like whoever I'm dating has no impact on you. I cannot stress it enough. You're not my life coach. You're not my dating coach. You're not my parent. You're not God. Like it has no impact on you. And it's just, it's weird. Number one, to want to insert yourself in there. And then it also gave me a sense of not only entitlement, but a sense of like power. Like this person wanted to have control over what it was that I was doing. And you don't get to have control over my life because I'm the only one driving this car, right? until I relinquish control to Jesus himself. But other than that, like, you don't get to control any aspect of my life, and you don't get to feel uncomfortable about my boundaries. You can either get with it or get gone. There has been times in my professional life where, like, I didn't set boundaries. Like, I would let my boss switch around my schedule, work me to no end without setting boundaries and like limitations. And when you do that, especially in your career, in your job, the minute they feel like they got away with it the first time, they're going to consistently do it. And then it's harder to come back and draw that line and be like, hey, you can't just switch my schedule because it's more convenient for you, or it's more convenient for the team, or, you know, it's just more convenient for the store as a whole. And it's important to be flexible in work. Like, I get that. I understand that from an employee's perspective and from a manager's perspective. It's important to have some flexibility, but it's not appropriate to be used and abused, and jobs will do it if you allow them to. So you have to set those boundaries. Like, if I say I have to be gone by 5 p.m. on Tuesdays, then no, you cannot schedule me to 6 p.m. because you didn't have anybody to come in within that median time. Find somebody else to do it. Find somebody else. I have to be gone by 5 p.m. And there was I think I was supposed to have like Mondays off. Like, it was a very specific reason why I needed to have Mondays off. And one day the schedule came out, and I was working on Monday. Not only was I working on Monday, I was closing on Monday. And I'm like, well, that's crazy, because I'm supposed to have Mondays off always. Like, this was what we agreed on. This wasn't just something I made up. And I'm trying to remember the exact reason why my boss said that she needed somebody to work that Monday. I think the person who usually closed on Monday, like, requested that day off or something. I don't remember exactly, but in that moment, I was just like, oh, okay, I get it. And she's like, well, what other day do you want off? So I just took another day off, and I should have been like, no, absolutely not. I have Mondays off for a reason. And if the person who normally closes on Monday could not close, then you find somebody else who doesn't need Mondays off to close. Like, do you get what I'm saying? And it seems like such a simple thing to just be like, okay, well, it's a specific day I said I can't work, so make sure that they don't make you work. But it's a boundary, because guess what? The minute I let her pull that shit one time, I think for like a month straight, I was closing on Mondays. And it's just like, well, what's going on? And anytime I bring it up, oh, because this happened. Oh, because that happened. And do you know why these things kept coming up and I kept being the scapegoat? Because I allowed myself to be the scapegoat. So once somebody again crosses over your limitation, they'll keep doing it because they feel like they can, because you didn't stand 10 toes down on your boundaries. And that is just a small example. There are such bigger examples and more boundaries that hold like greater impact, hold more weight in your life, and you have to stand 10 toes down on them. But if you can't stand 10 toes down on the small boundaries, then how are you going to stand 10 toes down on the big boundaries, right? Boundaries at work are so important, and boundaries at home are equally as important. I've had to set boundaries between myself and my family, and it went after years of abuse. And what I mean by abuse is like years of them using me and needing me, and me always being the scapegoat or the bank or or the problem solver. My mom once referred to me as the peacemaker. She's like, well, you know, you're the peacemaker. Do you know what happens when you're the peacemaker in your family? Anytime there's an issue, everyone's going to run to you. While I don't have any issue being the non-biased party who can instill some type of good measure, some type of peace offering, when there's conflict within my family, it becomes like, after so long, it becomes a level of like being abused, in a sense of like they're abusing their power over me to solve all their problems, because it's just going to be like, okay, well, Kiana's going to solve this. Kiana's going to fix this. Like, and Kiana got her own problems, but cannot focus solely on you and your personal life, because you're constantly, like, you're constantly, like, you're always fixing problems for everybody else. So, okay. I take in a lot of energy. Like, We throw that word energy around, but I need you to understand in its full context the amount of energy I absorb from everyday interactions from people. And I spoke about, different energy and things like that in the spirituality episode. So go back and listen, whether you have or you haven't already. I think you should go back and listen to it in its entirety again, just to fully understand what I mean by like energy. Every time you have a conversation with somebody, you hug somebody, any type of exchange, it's an energy exchange. And negative energy weighs heavier on me than positive energy does. And I'm often, after negative interactions, I'm so drained of my energy, my good energy, that it can take me days to weeks to get back to a good space energetically, right? So if I'm constantly solving problems of other people bickering, what do you think that does for my energy? And it's really selfish, in my opinion, to have somebody consistently always solving your problems instead of doing it on your own, or consistently going to the same person for the same things. And side note, I talk to people a lot about trauma dumping. Like, when I know that what I'm about to tell somebody is heavy energetically, like it's heavy mentally, it's heavy emotionally, I'll even give a little disclaimer. Like, do you have the mental capacity to listen to my bullshit right now? Like, do you have the mental capacity to receive everything I'm about to dump on you? And I always give them, like, no hard feelings, the option to say yes or to say no. Because the minute you start pouring out your negativity on somebody, that can be heavy for them mentally, physically, emotionally, energetically. And I think people don't understand that. And sometimes people do understand that and they don't respect that. So don't go dumping all your trauma, all your negativity on me without so much as a disclaimer. And I feel like where I had to draw the line and the boundary within my family, like, I can't always solve everything for y'all. I can't. I remember one time I was getting ready to head to the airport to go to, I still live in Milwaukee, to go to Texas for my dad's funeral. And my sister called me because she had a problem. And it was an ongoing problem that I had been helping her with. And I'm just like, I can't. Not now. Not now. My energy is barely there as it is. I'm like, I'm so sorry. I can't do it. And I got another call from a friend who needed to talk about something. I'm just like, I can't. I just can't right now. Like, no, this is where I draw the line. And I remember getting off the phone and I looked at my boyfriend at the time, and I was like, I just need everybody to hold their shit together for 1 minute without calling me so I can go bury my motherfucking daddy. Can we do that? Can everybody do that? Can everybody hold it together for themselves while I go and deal with something that is killing me mentally, emotionally, physically, energetically, and all that above? So, again, I've had to draw limitations, lines in the sand. I've had to establish boundaries within my family because I cannot always be the problem solver. Because with solving their problems leaves very little space, time, and energy to solve my own problems. And sometimes people don't appreciate that. Well, what are we supposed to do? We were expecting you to fix this. We were expecting you to plan this. We were expecting you to solve this. You allow someone to put a certain expectation on you or to put you in a certain position for so long. And then when you don't do it, it's like, well, what are you doing? You've done it for so long. Why aren't you doing it now? Right? Another example. So a few years ago when I was like moving up the chain, in retail management for Forever 21, I mean, almost every 6 months I was getting another raise, $1 here, $2 there, $1.50 there, 75 cents there. I mean, it just kept coming and coming and coming. So more money kept coming and coming and coming. So anytime my family, like my mom, my brother, my sister, like anybody would ask for money, it's just like, oh, hey, yeah, I do got it. Okay. Yeah, I do got it. You know, we're celebrating these raises. I'm excited. Let's go out to dinner. Let's have drinks. Yeah, I'm getting a raise. And then there came a point in time where I left that job. I no longer made that money, but nobody outside of, me, because I'm seeing my bank account every day, is rationalizing that she doesn't make the money that she used to make. So they're steady asking and asking and asking. And not everybody, I want to be very specific that not everybody reacted this way, but a few family members are just like, no, I can't have $50. No, you can't send me $25. No, you can't pay for this. No. What? I mean, it's crazy. I hate to even say this, but I even had a situation with my own mom because she was upset that I wasn't giving her money like I used to. And it's just like, well, I don't have money coming in like I used to. And even at one point in time, I did still have the money coming in, but it was just like, well, what is this Bank of Kiana? Like, is this the Kiana Credit Union? Because y'all don't have any deposits, just withdrawals. And it's just kind of like, well, what the trying not to cuss. But they like, what the hell? What do you mean? No, I don't get no money. And sometimes I would give money, and whether they said they would give it back or not, I'll even let it slide because I wasn't hurting for money. But one time in particular, I expected my money back from my brother, and he was dodging me for a while. And it was excuse after excuse. And, I'm going to send it here and I'm going to send it there. And then one day I'm like, yo, I'm tired of having to ask for my money. Like, this is completely ridiculous. Like, if you didn't plan on paying me back, I would rather you, and I tell people this all the time, I would rather you ask me for the money than to be like, can I borrow the money? Because the minute you say borrow, I'm going to be expecting it back. But if you don't say borrow, can I get, do you got, are you able to spare? Then I'm not necessarily expecting it back. But if you do, God bless you, right? Me and my brother ain't speak for 6 months because he's upset because he's expecting me not to ask for the money back. And now that I have set that boundary, and now I do want everything that's going out to come back in, it's a problem. Yeah, man, I'm telling y'all, I said all that to say it's not easy to go back in and reestablish those boundaries because people aren't good with self-reflection, number one. Within the most recent example, there was a greater problem than me not setting that boundary. It was the entitlement of my family to think that they were, they were entitled in some way to the money that I was given, that the money that I had earned, and they felt like it should have been given to them. They had built up a sense of entitlement. So then when I draw that line, it's not just like, oh, damn, I'm having a hard time respecting this boundary. It's how dare you? How dare you draw this boundary? How dare you feel like I have to pay you back? How dare you feel like you don't owe me money? Right? Because they're not seeing in their mind that, we took it too far. Like, maybe she doesn't have it, or, that's her money. That's her right. It's like, no, how dare you not give me the rights to also what you have? You start setting those boundaries in place and people are going to start taking it personally. Many examples with my roommate, like with my family, like even sometimes with passengers, like now you take it personally because I've set this boundary in place and you don't have the level of respect and self-awareness to be like, okay, like this is a boundary that I should not cross. And boundaries are a form of self-care. And we are all about self-care, self-love, self-healing. And when I begun my healing journey, I realized the lack of boundaries that I had set in every relationship in my life. And boundaries are a way of taking care of your mental health and ensuring that your well-being is respected. Because if you respect yourself, you will not allow other people to come in and disrespect you by not respecting your boundaries. And at the end of it all, everyone wants to feel like their well-being is valued and cared for. Doesn't matter who you are. Everyone wants to feel like their voice matters, their thoughts matters, their ideas matter, their comfort level matters. And you don't ever want to be in any type of relationship with anyone at any point in your life where you feel disrespected or you feel like your voice doesn't matter. And that's why it's super important to be able to comfortably and safely communicate your needs and your limitations through boundaries. There are 5 types of boundaries that I want you to consider. Number 1 being your emotional boundaries. We all have our own thoughts and feelings, and it's important to be clear on what is and isn't yours to feel or fix. Focus on your emotions and your emotional well-being. So for me, example of an emotional boundary will be, I tell my friends, you don't get to, or nobody really gets to make me feel like my feelings on a situation didn't matter. Like if I'm expressing a situation that happened, and even if everybody else didn't see it that way, or like I hate when people try to reassure me in a way, or they're just like trying to downplay a situation. And I'm like, no, you don't get to tell me how to feel about a situation. You don't get to make it seem like my feelings about the situation was invalid, no matter how you felt about that situation. Does that make sense? Like, you don't get to tell me my emotions are invalid because I control and I justify how I feel about a situation. And you don't have to agree with it, but you don't get to invalidate it either. And that's an emotional boundary that I set in place, period. Number 2, intellectual boundaries. So everyone has different beliefs, ideas, and values. So it's important for us to respect each other's viewpoints. Like typically I hang around a lot of people when we're very like-minded, but we don't always agree on everything. And I'm okay with agreeing to disagree, but we don't have to lose respect in the midst of it. Like there's a such thing as healthy debates. And I love debating and have different conversations on different topics. But where the boundary gets set into place is just because we don't agree on the same thing, just because we don't have the same belief system, does not mean it has to get ugly or disrespectful, or you have to demean another person because you don't believe in what they believe in. So, example was as it came to like the last presidential election between Biden and Trump. I know people who voted for Biden. I know people who voted for Trump. But I think the important thing in that situation was that we all had a mutual respect for each other, which we could sit down and be like, okay, well, why did you feel the need to vote for this person? Why did you feel the need to vote for this person? Even if I thought their reasoning was completely stupid and unjustified, I'm allowed to keep that to myself and not try to make them feel stupid. It's just like, okay, you have your opinions, I have mine, and that's just where we stand. It's not that serious. It doesn't have to be that deep, but it becomes crossing a boundary when you do try to demean a person for having a difference in opinion in you, when God did not create any of us to be the same, to have the same ideals, and to walk the same path. And it's important to have respect in that aspect of things. Number 3, physical boundaries. We all have different levels of comfort when it comes to physical touch. Some people may be comfortable with hugs, for example. Other people may not appreciate physical touch in that context. And I mean, I've obviously spoken about this a couple times. I'm uncomfortable with certain aspects of physical touch, especially when I don't know you like that. Like, I'm definitely a hugger. Like, I'm a hugger. I hug my friends. I hug my families. I hug my family. And that's because we have a certain relationship. I don't have a relationship with you. There's no need for physical touch. And even in like, people that I have, another example, like people that I do have close relationships with, I don't think there's a need for any excessive touching. I used to have a friend, and every time she would drink and she would like tell jokes and like laugh a lot, and she would just like tap, 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 like literally every couple words she would like tap my leg, and I'm like, damn bitch, quit tapping me. Like what is this about? Because you didn't tap one too many times, and now I feel like you ready to get physical, honey. What's up? But no, for real though, I think it's so important to speak up about all your boundaries, but especially your physical boundaries. I think it's so important, whether in the workplace, whether amongst your friends, and even if others can't understand your boundaries, you have the right to do what makes you comfortable. So make sure you give your friends, your coworkers, your family, the opportunity to also voice their personal limitations as it regards to physical boundaries as well. Because if you want to draw a line in the sand, give everybody else that space to draw a line in the sand too. And sometimes it's as simple as you speaking up about something and somebody else might feel more comfortable to speak up about it as well. Number 4, financial boundaries. Conversations about money can be tough and sometimes uncomfortable, but sometimes very necessary. For example, if your friends constantly choose, like, they want to go out to eat at expensive restaurants, you may need to set a boundary about what you're willing to spend. Like, don't ever get put in a situation that can potentially cause financial strain for you personally, because you don't want to set those limitations between people. Another example could be, if you're entering into a relationship, financial boundaries is super important. Like, in my last relationship, we talked about what we expect from each other financially before we moved in together. And after a year and a half of living together, he wanted to make drastic adjustments to our financial agreement. And I had to draw a line in the sand, because that's where I draw my boundaries. And I felt like I would be taking on a large portion of the financial burden, and I wasn't cool with that. And he knew I wasn't cool with that before we got together, before we moved in together. So the fact that a year and a half into this living arrangement, you trying to flip the script, no, that's where I draw the line. And I'm not going to be put in any uncomfortable financial situation that I don't agree with. You have to always consider what your financial goals are and be ready to share your relationship boundaries for this specific area. And again, I repeat, stand 10 toes down on it. If you have financial goals that you need to reach, I cannot stress this enough. Don't let anybody drag you into financial ruin by not standing 10 toes down on your financial boundaries. If your goal is to spend $100 for the month and your friends want to go out somewhere where you're going to drop $200 easily, trust me, I've been there. And you don't feel comfortable doing it, don't do it. Don't do it. Don't enter into a relationship where if you feel like the 50-50 split is good, then do that. But don't let the 50-50 become 70-30. Like, if it's 80-20, don't let it become 60-40. Like, whatever that looks like for you personally, just stand 10 toes down on it, because your comfortability should be most important to you. And forget how somebody else feels about it. And number 5, sexual boundaries. When it comes to physical intimacy, sexual boundaries shouldn't be ignored. You need to discuss what's off limits and what kind of contact you prefer. Setting sexual boundaries also includes prioritizing consent, right? So setting sexual boundaries can apply in a lot of different situations, right? Number 1, it applies with the person that you're in relationship with your significant other, with your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your fiance, your husband, your wife. It does not matter the title that this person holds. You have that right to set sexual boundaries in any way that makes you comfortable. You also have the right to set sexual boundaries with people in public. I've had to tell guys before, like, why do you think it's appropriate to fucking touch me and I don't know you? Why do you think that? I've had to set sexual boundaries between friends or people who I thought were friends, and it's just like you get a couple drinks in your system and you can get fully touchy in a sexual manner. And why do you think that that's appropriate? No, I draw the line in the sand, and you respect it because of that consent factor. Like, am I giving you consent to move forward in your advances, or am I not? And it doesn't matter. Like, even if you're in a relationship with somebody, you still have that right to consent, like to say yes or no. And that person should be able to respect those boundaries. And this is probably one of the areas of setting boundaries that can make people, especially women, more uncomfortable. But I strongly encourage you to set those boundaries in place to your comfortability level and stand 10 toes down on it. And never stick around in a situation where you feel like your boundaries are consistently being crossed. If you're scared or you're nervous or you're uncomfortable, you get out of there. Healthy boundaries are supposed to develop a mutual respect and create a sense of comfort and safety between you and another party. Unhealthy boundaries are basically the opposite, and they often lack the actual ability of not crossing the boundaries, right? Just remember, in order to establish and maintain healthy boundaries within any relationship, try to set them early on in a relationship, because it's easier when you're not doubling back to try to re-establish boundaries that somebody has already crossed. Remember to always clearly communicate your wants and your needs as it pertains to your boundaries. And remember, people will not always respect the boundaries that you put into place. But I strongly encourage you to stand on them, not allow anyone to cross them, and always, always, always be true to yourself and what you know and believe will make you not only happy, but comfortable. And if you are someone who don't respect people's boundaries, hear me when I say this. You need to start respecting other people's boundaries. My name is Kiana Bree, and this is the House of Trauma podcast. Please don't forget to email in all of your advice questions to houseoftrauma@gmail.com, where we will read and answer your questions here on the House of Trauma podcast. I'll see you next week.